Welcome to the Femininja Project. I am your host, Cheryl I Love, middle-aged ninja hiding in plain sight, dedicated to restoring human dignity one person at a time and helping you unleash your personal power. Discover that it's possible to look like a woman, act like a lady, move like a ninja, and think like a warrior. And remember, men are always welcome on the Femininja Project. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Femininja Project. And thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate you. Today's guest is a fascinating gentleman. His name is Thomas Wurm. He is the creator of Mountain Mind Tricks. He is a wildland firefighter, a master practitioner in NLP, hypnosis, and mental emotional release. He is also an author, coach, fitness trainer, athletic nutritionist, and host of the Sacred Ancestry Podcast, a podcast where you will learn how to master your mind, overcome negative emotions, and spiral upward towards your highest potential. Wow, that's pretty impressive. Thomas, thank you so much for being here and welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, and thanks for what an amazing introduction. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, you certainly deserve it. You are a fascinating person. And even just the fact that you're a wildland firefighter completely captured my attention when I first saw that on your profile. Tell us what brought you to wanting to do that type of work. It sounds incredibly dangerous and a little frightening.
Yeah, absolutely. There's definitely a lot of close calls in my career and all the danger and adrenaline that goes with it. But the way it started is so interesting. So my grandparents actually were fire lookouts in before World War II. Wow. And so my grandpa was on Mount Hood in Oregon, and my grandma was on Mount Adams on the other side of the river in Washington. And they would signal each other because there was fires or something. And they eventually started signaling more and more until they eventually just met up. And they eventually got married, and it's just an amazing story of how they actually met through the fire lookouts. So I am third generation. So my father was a wildland firefighter too, as well, in California in the 70s and 80s. And so I just kind of grew up around these stories of high action, high impact, all this crazy stuff going on with helicopters and radios and chainsaws. And I was just so intrigued with it, and I think by the time I was 16 or 17, I was like, that's what I want to do. I want to try it out. I want to do it. And after the first season, I was completely hooked. I just loved it so much. It's kind of like an extreme sport, but that's kind of the way I've always saw it. It's like this adrenaline rush, but you're getting paid for it. It's kind of insane going out there, really.
So how old were you when you started? Were you as young as 17 or?
I started when I was 18. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So the last 14 years, I've been hitting it pretty hard with the wildland fire, every 7 to 8 months, and, getting 1,000 hours of overtime every summer. And yeah, it's been quite a career the last 14 years.
Well, and especially this last year, the fire season was really terrible.
Yeah. I was in California all summer, and it was really bad and really, just saw things that doesn't really make sense. That's not in the classes, things, it's just changing so much than when I started 14 years ago. It's pretty interesting.
You actually told me the first time I met you and we were talking that you end up having some sort of a relationship with the fire. And you said it's almost like a dance between, yourself and the fire and how dynamic it is and it's constantly changing.
Yeah, it's such a crazy environment because everything's changing at all times. You have the fire, the fire is its own beast. And I'll talk about that in a second. But there's also this fire industrial complex that comes in. So when these big fire comes in, there's this, 500 people management team comes in with all the bulldozers and helicopters, and they got to feed everybody. And it's kind of like this mini city that pops up overnight. And so you have this whole logistical nightmare on top of this natural disaster, if you will. And so there's just so much going on in the environment. And I always felt like the fire was speaking to me in a weird way. And it took me a long time to really dive into that and be open to that. And what's so interesting is the fire would almost tell me like, no, don't go down that road. Don't cut that tree. No, don't do this. Like it would really guide me into um, finding the safe way to go about things. And it really taught me how to like trust my gut instinct to the point it's kind of ridiculous. Like I just get a gut check of yes or no. And that's how I make decisions to this day is like, I just ask my gut and it's really strong for me.
Have you ever talked to other firefighters who had that same experience, or is this something you just kind of hold close to your chest and don't really share with other people?
Well, so I think, most operations you'll hear, we kind of get started with like, go fight fire with your gut. And it's something we say a lot, but I don't think a lot of firefighters are like really understand what they're talking about. Like, I'm super open. I'm like a 10 out of 10 openness. So to me, the gut instinct is like, it's more than intuition. It's actually like kind of our energy field picking up on vibrations and in what's going on in our environment. So I don't think overall people really take it that far, but for me, I guess this evolved even deeper into like really understanding our gut instinct and then our intuition and our heart center, as well as checking things with our logical mind and really aligning all this together. And I kind of did that on my own on fires. And then I started reading into like Heart Math Institute and things were just like, oh my God, this is what they're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
They're talking about heart coherence and really getting alignment and making decisions that way. And so that's something I do train other firefighters in now is, in part of my coaching program is that internal leadership.
Are they very receptive to it, or are some of them a little bit more like, oh, this sounds woo-woo?
I would say, my clients, of course, are receptive to it, but overall, most of the fire community is just like, this guy's crazy because I am like, pretty fringe, I talk about just about anything. So
Mm-hmm. That is pretty fringe. However, I think it's fascinating. And now I know you do have a background in martial arts.
yes. High school was a big time for me. I would say Tai Chi mostly. And I spent about a year really heavily into Kung Fu and lots of yoga, which is, it's not a martial art, but it's similar.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say, yeah, Tai Chi, I probably spent about 3 or 4 years really heavy into it. So yeah.
So I'm wondering if maybe that influenced your ability to have that kind of connection, not only with your intuition, with your gut, and really listening to yourself and that heart connection, because you do go pretty deep if you're doing the right kind of martial art. I mean, I know some of them are just like, let's beat people up and go home. But a lot of them have a very deep sense of spirituality and growing your spirit and listening to yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the major thing that opened me up to all of this stuff was near-death experience in high school.
Mm-hmm.
And that changed everything for me. That was, I went from being a really crazy teenager with lots of like mental health stuff going on, drug addiction. And, unfortunately it led to me ODing on drugs. And that near-death experience completely changed me. I woke up the next day reading 2 or 3 books a week, meditating, yoga, Kung Fu, Tai Chi, all those things. It was just like my grades went from D's and F's to like 4.0s overnight. And so that was like the turning point where all of a sudden I was hungry for knowledge. I was really thirsty for trying to understand what consciousness is and going a lot deeper. Yeah.
So if I can ask this, and if you're uncomfortable answering, it's fine. But when you did have the NDE, did you have an experience where you saw a bright light, or you saw somebody dear to you, maybe your grandparents if they had been deceased, or did you have anything really specific that you experienced?
Yeah. So this is so interesting because I've also had some out of body experiences and I'll speak to that here in a second, but my near death experience, I was in such a dark place that there was nothing. It was darkness. It was absolutely nothing. No feelings, no presence, no nothing. And it actually took me a long time to realize that actually was a near death experience because it was so non anything. Nothing was there. And what convinced me was some of the research out there. I mean, that's like a third of experiences is a nothing darkness kind of void. But the impact it had on my life was so profound. I mean, it just changed everything for me. So, and later, I would say 3 or 4 years ago, I did have an out of body experience, which actually I've had a couple of those in my life. And that was very fantastical. That was very almost traumatizing in a good way, a very like spiritual awakening type event for me that was very powerful.
Did you see yourself outside of yourself as like you were observing yourself doing something?
I basically well, I'll just tell the whole story because it's so interesting. So, um, I like how we're kind of telling my story in different, like we're going back and forth in our timeline here. But so there's a lot that led up to this. What I'll say is there was like a traumatic event for me where somebody passed away close to me very suddenly. And so it built up this anxiety. I had really bad health anxiety, like a lot of mental health stuff going on, like severe physical symptoms from it. That's how like serious the anxiety was. And so again, I was driven back to meditation. It had been years and years since I really dived deep. And so I was getting into a practice of like meditating for 2 or 3 hours at night because I just could not sleep. So I was like going really deep. Um, and I just had this moment where I just asked out loud, like, universe, God, whatever you are, can you please open my third eye? And that was like, bam, like I was literally launched out of my body above the earth, like instantly. And I truly thought I was dead at that point. I was really confused, but I was looking down at the earth, like kind of like astronauts talk about, like, oh my God, this is so beautiful. It was so mesmerizing to see the whole biosphere. And so after that, I was just kind of in space, and I felt drawn to the sun, right? And I was drawn towards the sun. And when I got there, the sun kind of like compacted into like a light trail, like it would lead me somewhere else to the next sun and to the next star. And I kept following this light trail. I know this is insane, right? It just gets deeper. So I just kept following these light trails to the next solar system, to the next star, all the way till I got the Milky Way center, which was a black hole. And I followed that and went to like the next galaxy over and the next galaxy. And I kept like going through these light tunnels for seemed like it was super fast, but it felt like forever, And I eventually got to the center of the universe. And at that point, I just started zooming out to where I could see the entire universe of like clusters of galaxies connected. And it looked like neurology, like mycelium. And it was just like these sparks flying from left to right across the whole screen. Like it was just so profound to see this vision. And this thought voice came in that was like, this is the universe. It is pure consciousness. And that was it. I was just slammed right back into my body. And it wasn't like it was like a knowing, right? It was like this profound, like, it just gives me chills to even talk about it. Cause it's so like, it's hard to even explain with words how that felt. That was definitely a enlightening moment, if you will. And so that like really showed me like, okay, there's so much more than just blackness on the other side. So for sure. And I'm so happy we're jumping into the weird stuff like immediately because it's my favorite.
Well, I've been known to go a little weird, so but just the way you were describing going in and seeing the sparks and stuff, and it looked like neurology, because as you know how much I love neurology and the nervous system, and the neural connections and the synapses, and I could just picture that when you were talking about it, even though your words can't do the experience justice, but I could just imagine in my own head what you were seeing, and the depth of there is so much more, not only in the universe, but in our own bodies, in our own minds, and our own spirits, that we don't even realize is there until you have an experience like that just, kind of wakes you up.
Yeah, absolutely. And what just keeps coming up about it is that it was a fractal, right? Like I was seeing the whole earth, that was a fractal. I was seeing the whole universe, that was a fractal. And to me, it really, in everything I've studied or felt or experienced meditation, it's like our body is actually a fractal of the universe. Like there's everything we need inside of ourselves. Everything we need is right here. We just have to tap into it.
Which is so sad, because we're always looking outside of ourselves and looking for something else to make us happy or make us feel good, or make us healthy or whatever. So that's amazing, the power that we have deep inside of us. But I do want to ask you if that experience is what led you to start studying NLP and hypnosis and really going deep into the mental emotional releases. Was that facilitator for your experience of starting to pursue those interests, or was it happening pretty much at the same time?
Yeah, I would say that before the event, I was kind of, I'm trying to fix myself. I want to be healthy. Like, I want this anxiety to go away. And after that, I would say my health declined. I got way worse for a while because it was so like my nervous system got burned up pretty hard. Um, and so I did get worse, but I had this gift of like, I want to help people. I really want to help people. I have no idea what that means. I don't know how, I don't know where, I don't know when. I just know that I'm going to help people. And eventually that I found an acupuncturist that could really help me and like help me basically turn down the electricity in my nervous system. I was just so on fire, like literally on fire. And I write about that in my book a lot. So that journey through acupuncture, and he was definitely more of a shamanic type practitioner. So there's a lot more going on than just needles. He was a basic NLP practitioner. He's like, you should just go check this out. Like go take a training. They're really cheap. The first like entry level, like just go do it. And when I was sitting in class, there was so many synchronicities like on the PowerPoints and the lessons and all when everything the teachers were talking about was like, oh my God, this is everything I've thought my entire life. Like I was just so struck. I was like, I have to do this. Like, this is it. This is exactly it. And I ran to the back and signed up for master practitioner. I was like, I got to do it. And it was just so life altering, those classes, especially master practice. It's 2 weeks of just being surrounded by people that are talking about the exact same thing we're talking about now, consciousness, energy, healing, quantum physics, all that stuff for 2 weeks, and in that I got to do my own mental emotional release. And that's where, all the healing really took place. I mean, I was doing good by that time, but that was like the cherry on top. I was like, my anxiety is gone, like 100% gone. And so I was just so convinced. I was like, I have to do this for other people. Like, this is my calling. So yeah, I love it. It's my favorite. It's just amazing.
How long have you been doing it?
Let's see. I got certified for the mastery level in July.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah. It's amazing.
So obviously you work with a lot of people who do have intense anxiety if they are wildland firefighters, because that is such a high intensity job. You're never off when you're at a site, or I don't know what you call it, but it's constantly, you don't have a chance to really turn off your nervous system, and you're in that sympathetic nervous system, that fight or flight type of hypervigilant state the entire time that you're there.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially, the bigger fires, maybe you're going to sleep pretty far away, but sometimes you're like sleeping on the fire line, you're sleeping, a quarter mile away. So you're never really like, you never get to rest because, I mean, I've had multiple times, like so many times you're woken up in the middle of the night, like, oh, we got to get out of here because their fire is coming. Right. So or trees falling around you or bears coming at you. It's just, the environment never stops. So you just don't stop. And I would say that's a big one for my clientele, and is, they go from going 100 miles an hour for 6, 7, 8 months to back to home life. And it's just, it's this seasonal, it's like, I mean, it's really not even close to war, but it's kind of like that, where you're going into that environment every 6 months, coming home for 6 months. So it's just this off and on constantly. And it really does, there's a lot going on mentally, emotionally, for sure.
I would think it would be so surreal returning to your regular environment after going through that for 6 months.
Yeah.
Re-entry is tough no matter what. That kind of intense work and that kind of pressure, and everybody's just walking around like, hey, business as usual, nothing's changed here, where your whole life has been not only uprooted, but on the firing line, literally.
Yeah. What's so interesting is I think a lot of the public just has no idea. They have no idea what we do, how we do it. They do see the kind of local folks on the TV, and they're really clean yellows and all that stuff. And it's like, no, that doesn't even get close to what we do. I mean, we're sleeping in the dirt for 2 weeks. We're hiking 15, 20 miles a day with like 50-pound packs, cutting trees down. eating really bad food, sleeping 3, 4 hours a day. It's just brutal. It's really hardcore. Yeah.
What did you call it? A high intensity sport? I can't remember the word.
Yeah, it's what's so crazy is like if you look at some of the studies of the physiology that's going on, it's actually the wildland firefighters are kind of in a whole nother level of they're like Olympic athletes as far as endurance level. And it's not like you go to one event. This is you're in that Olympic athlete endurance level for 2 weeks.
Wow.
And yeah, it's crazy. It's amazing. It's they're true heroes. They're pushing their bodies to the maximum.
So I want to just take a moment to say thank you so much for what you do. Thank you so much for the firefighting and all of your colleagues. I mean, the general public has no idea. And if they did, I mean, you truly are heroes, heroes of the forest. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
Because I know you do love the mountains. It's pretty obvious. And you are a snowboarder. Or do you still snowboard?
Yes, absolutely. Snowboard, and I've gotten into split boarding the last couple of years, which is more backcountry.
Ooh.
Yeah. Yeah. So the snowboard splits down like a hot dog, kind of. And then you switch your bindings around. So you put like sticky carpet on the bottoms. Then you climb up the mountain, you put it all back together and snowboard down. So yeah, it's so much fun.
Sounds like a lot of work to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's talk about your book, because that was something, I knew you were an author, but it wasn't until I started looking at your book and learning a little bit more about it. It's just absolutely fascinating. And it fits right into everything we've already been talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. The Awakened by Heartfire is that book was just, how do you even explain it? I guess it's kind of like a memoir a little bit. There's some stories in there of me, and I kind of break up the stories into kind of every chapter. There's at least a story that applies. And really the premise of the book is I took my wildland fire career and really slowed it down. Like, what did I learn spiritually? What did I learn that can help other people? And what's so interesting is I learned so many things, how to like use my gut instinct, intuition, those kinds of things, and really tap into my highest self out there in the fire line, and really slowing that down and like making a step-by-step method was so profound and interesting. Because I was like a high level tree faller. And so they would always call me into like a big tree that's on fire, like 60 feet up, like 6 foot diameter at the base. Like that'd be me. So I get in there, right? And I'm standing at this tree, like, okay, I would literally, I go through a whole process, but I would close my eyes, ask the tree, can I cut you down right now? Like, is this safe? And so talking to the trees, like really understanding that the fire is more of this elemental consciousness that we're interacting with. So it goes really deep into the metaphysical energy of wildland firefighting, and then the lessons that came out of that. And so there's a lot of like heart fire, infinity fire, spot fire. There's a lot of words like that, again, it's like fractals. It's really interesting.
So the fire really has been one of your greatest teachers.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's definitely burned me. It's done so many things to me. And it's like, because fire is really abrupt, right? It changes the whole landscape immediately. And I felt that spiritually, especially through that spiritual awakening event. It burned me truly inside. So there's so many parallels and fractals to this story. It's so interesting.
So in your book, then, you do give those life lessons that other people can apply to their daily life. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely.
So you're telling your story and giving the kind of like the self-help tips along the way, or is it a separate part of the book? Do you do that at the end of the book?
It's definitely woven into like self-help stories and my experiences. It's all kind of woven in together. And I would say the last couple of chapters really detail out like the specific heart fire method and, finding nourishment, sensing danger, like all those kinds of things. Cause, like sensing danger, yeah, we can talk about that in like a physical realm, but there's a lot of danger spiritually or mentally or emotionally that maybe we don't think about all the time. So also finding nourishment is more like, finding what lights you up, like finding not just food, but I'm talking about like really nourishing your body, like going in the sun, going out in nature, like all those things that really nourish you on a whole different level.
Now, I also would like to have you talk about your podcast, because I absolutely love the name, the Sacred Ancestry Podcast.
Oh, yeah.
You told me a lot about the sacred ancestry the first time that we talked on the phone. And it was really just fascinating the way you were making the connection. So if you can share that with our audience, I'd really appreciate it.
Yeah. So sacred ancestry is really, it almost comes back to like all the ancient cultures of, Vedic, Hawaiian, Native Americans of course, everybody's going to think of that indigenous culture. And of course that's sacred. But what I'm talking about is more like our sacred ancestry as human beings, of that higher self, which is really that divine light that we're connected to, that divine energy that we're connected to. And I think one of our missions here on earth, is to wake up to that divine energy, that we have everything we need inside of ourselves, and that we really are we're more of a soul walking on earth, going on an earth walk for a while, and we will return back to source eventually. And that's sacred ancestry, is remembering that divine energy and who we are really.
So you said that your podcast, people will learn how to master their mind and overcome negative emotions. If you can just touch on how we can overcome negative emotions, because I think that's really important to our mental and physical health. And again, now we're still dealing with a lot of stress this past year, now a year and a half, that I think people are just so stressed, and they are having a lot of not only negative emotions, negative self-talk, maybe negative experiences in their relationships. So if you can address that, that'd be great.
Yeah. So really, I do have a lot of other master practitioners or colleagues that come on. So we'll jam about NLP, hypnosis, and mental emotional release. But specifically, I think the best way to explain it is our neurology, and kind of where, if you read a lot of Bruce Lipton or look into biology belief, he talks about conscious parenting, where from 0 to 6, we're really like this sponge, like everything we observe, everything we see, everything that we do or try to do at that age, it programs our subconscious mind, right? So there's our conscious mind, where we're talking, we're writing, we're focused, but our subconscious mind is really like this supercomputer that's just running the background of, of course, it's running our heart, our lungs, all the basic stuff, but it's also storing our emotions. It's storing everything that's ever happened to us. And so from 0 to 6, it really kind of installs the programs for the rest of our lives. And most people don't even realize they've got a negative program that's just running, that really is their parents. And what's really interesting is sometimes there's a past life or genealogical, it's like a grandparent or great grandparent program that's running. And so, as a master practitioner, what I do is, through the mental emotional release, we work with the subconscious mind, and we actually take that person's consciousness from now, and we go back in time to the very first time they felt anger or sadness or hurt or fear. We go back to that very first event, and it doesn't matter what it is. It could be in the womb. It could be the birth. It could be past life. It could be when you're 7 years old. It could be when you're 20. It doesn't matter. The first time you felt anger. And just by going back in time with your mind right now, it's kind of like quantum physics. It's like an antimatter bomb that just obliterates all those negative emotions, because we just changing the time reference and seeing it from the outside, you're like, oh, okay, I get that. I understand, and I can release that now. Mm-hmm. And suddenly that anger is gone, not just from that event, but from that event all the way until now. And so it was so profound for me, and everything I've ever seen my clients do. It's so powerful. And so there's, not everybody has to go through a breakthrough session. There's a million different ways to do this, but I do talk about that a lot in the podcast of, how do you do that? How do you even identify your negative programs? How do you, which I guess those negative programs really do lead into negative emotions, because when they're on repeat, you're just going to be kind of sitting in that juice that's just rough. It's hard, it's ugly. And the way to get out of it is, to me, the subconscious mind, our neuroplasticity, our neurology.
I thought it was interesting when you were mentioning grandparents, great grandparents, because I really think that some of the experiences that our ancestors had, especially if they weren't good ones, they do get passed along somehow in a way that some of those experiences were so profound, it really changes their DNA. And so it's
Yeah.
programmed in there. And then when they start, procreating the next generation, the generation after that, that it does get passed down to a certain level or to a certain degree. And I think that people don't realize that. I mean, I didn't realize it until I started getting into a little bit more of the deeper cosmic sciences, maybe, let's say. And it really is true. And I look back at, my parents' lives and their parents, so my grandparents and my great grandparents, who all hailed from Eastern Europe. And even, my dad came over to this country in late December of 1939, got out of Czechoslovakia, and that he and my grandmother were on the last boat out. And just,
Wow.
the trauma of that. And there he was, he grew up on this farm in Czechoslovakia. And then all of a sudden, there he is in a highly industrialized steel town with meeting his father basically for the first time. This guy he didn't even know. I mean, it's weird. And so how does that not impact not only his life, but the next generation and the generations after that?
Yeah, absolutely. And exactly how that happens, like I can't tell you, I'm not a DNA, epigeneticist. But what's so interesting is I see it in a lot of clients, and it's just, I can't really explain it. I don't really need to. They feel better. I feel better. It's more common than you would think. And what's really interesting is I think the birthing process is really traumatic for a lot more people than we think. And I would say half my clients we release something from their actual birth.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of the programs as well come from when they're in the womb.
Mm-hmm.
That is something that's I don't think a lot of people realize that, you're not fully formed into a fetus, and it doesn't matter. Like it's beyond the body. The consciousness is absorbing those arguments, that stress, the whatever is going on in the environment. It's powerful stuff to release that. Yeah. It's so interesting to go really deep into those negative programs and to move them, to change them. And what's, I think, the most amazing part about it is that there's true physiological changes. Most times, some clients will be like, I've been going to a chiropractor for 2 years, and they go back and their body's completely perfect. It's there's, I haven't had any clients, but there's so many colleagues with like major medical things changing. I mean, it's kind of amazing when we look into more of this quantum physics type healing arts.
And I have to admit, I have never heard that word before. Epigeneticist?
Yeah, it's a newer type of biology that's really going into how our DNA and genes aren't really what we thought they were, and that our genes aren't passed down to, well, you get your genes and that's all it is. Mm-hmm. What they're finding out is it's really all about the environment, our nutrition, our thoughts, so even our beliefs, our feelings. Everything is more about our environment, and that's what triggers the genes to be turned on and off. And that's it's definitely fringe science, but it's definitely science. It's just most of academia is just like, we don't want to think about that because it kind of blows everything apart.
I think in a lot of ways it's either threatening or it's just you've heard one way for so long, it's hard to imagine that it could be something different.
Right. Absolutely.
That brings me to another thing about the NLP, something that you had explained to me the last time we talked, that the nervous system or the brain cannot distinguish a negative.
Yeah. And that was kind of a mind blower for me in class. I was like, oh my gosh. So yeah, the subconscious mind doesn't process negations. And what that means, is don't, can't, won't, even like try. Those things, I will try. A try is you're already canceled it out. You're not going to do it, straight up. And the don't is, well, if you say that sentence and you delete that word, what are you saying? I want this. I want that. I want the negative things in my life. And so It really is, the NLP is neuro linguistic programming. And so the languaging, the way we talk to ourselves, the way we write out affirmations, the way we talk to other people, it is more profound than we can even know. We really are. Our words are very tied to, I would say, our manifest, our destiny, the way we live our life. And I always tell people to be really careful with exactly the way you say things, because you're basically calling into the universe what you want to happen. So you want to say what you want, not what you don't. And the interesting one is but. The word but, it deletes everything before. So if it's like, oh, this, I love you, but the classic, right? So that's the other negation that's so common. So it really is all about our language, and it's so powerful. Yeah, absolutely. And that's what's so interesting about the NLP is when you become a practitioner, you really learn how literally I can talk to clients and start changing their neurology just by the way I'm talking to them. And so it's just mind blowing how directional language or directionalized language in NLP can actually, have somebody, like a reframe. Everybody knows what a reframe is, right? You kind of like change the position or change the view. And it's like, well, that is literally changing the way they think about things and the neurology. It's so interesting.
So how can people get a hold of you, Thomas?
Yeah, so mountainmindtricks.com is the main website, and Facebook, Thomas M. Wurm on there, Mountain Mind Tricks on Instagram, Sacred Ancestry Podcast, and then, my book, Awaken My Heart Fire, is on Amazon, and my other book, Overcome Anxiety Like a Hero, is on Amazon. So, yeah, you can check those out. And
when did you write that one?
That was my first book, and Awaken My Heart Fire is my second one.
Mm-hmm. Congratulations. And when did Awakening Your Heart Fire come out?
Oh, let's see. I think about a year ago, maybe. Yeah.
Congratulations. Do you have plans for any more?
Yes. Lots of books coming. Right. Always writing.
There's a lot of healing power in writing too, as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's so interesting because I do work with a lot of firefighters, but these things that we're talking about, it's really for if somebody wants to reach out, we'll make it work. So
you do work with clients one-on-one?
Yes.
And they can contact you just by going to your website.
Yeah. So there's a discovery session button or learn more. All the buttons on the website just take you to a form, fill that out, and we'll schedule a 1 hour kind of meet and greet.
I just have to ask, do you have any final pearls of wisdom that you want to leave the listeners with? I mean, this has been fascinating. I thank you so much for being here. This has been great.
I think one of the biggest things is, trusting your gut instinct is so powerful. And it's not like, sometimes I find myself like, well, do I want this or do I want that? Or what about that option or option D or C or F? But if we just come to do I want this? Yes or no, you'll get a good answer, and follow your heart, follow your gut, because it's telling you the truth.
Great words of wisdom. Once again, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much.
And everybody, thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate you as well. And remember to check out Thomas's website, check him out on Instagram, go to his Facebook page, check out his books. I think they are fascinating. And remember to drop him a line if you have any questions. I know he would love to hear from you. And remember to follow your heart, listen to your gut, and listen to your instincts. And that is the way of the Femininja. And that's a wrap on another episode of the Femininja Project. Thank you so much for listening. And remember, be safe, be strong, and until next time, bye now.